Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Israeli Government Spokesman Eylon Levy. This is day 54 of the war with Hamas's army of terror after the October 7th massacre. First, an important update about the release of our hostages in Gaza, and then we will move on to your questions. Today is day 6 of the hostage release pause, which has now been extended beyond the original 4 days. Last night, we welcomed home 12 hostages, 10 of our citizens and 2 Thai nationals. The names of the Israeli citizens who were released from captivity last night are as follows: Tamar Metzger, aged 78, Ditza Hyman, aged 84, Noralin Babadila, 60, Adas Sagi, 75, Ophelia Adit Reutman, aged 77, Rimon Kirst, 36, Mirav Tal, 53, Gabriela Leimberg, aged 59, Mia Leimberg, aged 17, the only minor on that list, and Clara Marman, aged 63. The government of Israel is committed to securing the return of all the hostages and missing persons. We are committed to the pledge there will be no one left behind. And when Hamas stops giving back hostages, we will resume military pressure in order to bring them all home. The latest numbers: 161 people remain as hostages in the Gaza Strip. That number includes 146 Israelis and 15 foreigners. That doesn't include dual nationals. 126 are men and 35 are women. There are still 4 children under the age of 18. 4 aged 18 to 19, and 10 people aged 75 and older, including the husbands of many of the elderly women who have been released from captivity and now returning home with their husbands still hostages of Hamas. As of today, 86 hostages have been released from captivity. 66 of them are Israeli nationals. That's 60 Israelis as part of the agreement to secure their release, and 20 foreign nationals. In addition to those 66, 2 hostages, in addition to those 86, 2 hostages were murdered in captivity, and their bodies located by our IDF soldiers. They are, of course, Noa Marciano and cancer patient Yehudit Weiss, who was held in Hamas captivity without her life-saving medication. There are also 4 hostages and MIAs in Gaza from before October 7th, dating back to the 2014 war. Israel is committed to bring all of the hostages home, whether through this current hostage release pause or after further pressure. Last week's government decision provides for a 5-day extension of the hostage release pause, with enough violent criminals in Israeli prisons lined up for release to get another 50 hostages out, 40 at this point, 10 a day. And the government has also approved a list of another 50 violent criminals for prospective release, should Hamas decide to continue releasing hostages and letting them go home. As the survivors of Hamas captivity return home over the last week, we're beginning to discover new chilling details about life as Hamas hostages. I'm, of course, not at liberty to share information from the official investigations, but the evidence that the families have been sharing with the media is chilling. The hostages were not held in reasonable conditions, as some have cynically claimed. Our children were serially abused. Just like Hamas recorded its own crimes against humanity on October 7th, it continues to document its own atrocities, releasing footage of crowds terrorizing the hostages in their final moments of captivity. Those scenes bringing to mind that scene from Game of Thrones, and fans of the series will of course know which scene I'm talking about. And we welcome international condemnation, notably from the German ambassador to Israel, His Excellency Stefan Seibert, about the disgraceful conditions that Hamas terrorists manufactured around the hostages to terrorize them in their last minutes of captivity. The testimonies are harrowing. Little Emily Hand's father Thomas has movingly told media that she only speaks in whispers because she was conditioned not to make a noise. He sees the terror in her eyes. She thought that she had been held hostage for a whole year. Her face is gaunt. She thought that everyone, including her father, had been murdered or abducted on October 7th, and her father has had to break the news to her that her stepmother had also been murdered on that dark day. He says she cries herself to sleep until her face is red. She didn't want any comfort, said Mr. Hand. I guess she forgot how to comfort herself. She got under the covers, covered herself, and cried quietly. not reasonable conditions by any stretch of the imagination. 12-year-old Eitan Yahalomi, according to his aunt, was threatened at gunpoint when he cried, forced to watch films of Hamas atrocities, those being the films we assume that Hamas recorded on its own GoPros on October 7th, and was beaten in the streets when he was abducted into Gaza on October 7th. Daphna and Ella Eliakim, aged 15 and 8, told their grandmother that their captors told them that nobody wanted them back home and scared them with the threat that they would be killed. Now, their father, partner's son were all murdered on October 7th, and I can't imagine the extent of the psychological horror and terror that they endured. Little girls being told that nobody wanted them back home. Hostages have also told media that if they needed to go to the bathroom, they had to knock on the door and wait an hour before they were able to go. The health ministry has reported that elderly women abducted by Hamas lost between 8 and 15 kilos on average, as well as, of course, being denied vital medication. This is starvation, this is abuse, this is torture. Hamas continues to deny the remaining hostages access to the Red Cross until the moment that it passes them on to the Red Cross through jeering crowds. We demand that the Red Cross be given access, but now at least the world can see why Hamas is not allowing the Red Cross to check on the condition of the hostages being held in inhumane conditions. It is an international humanitarian moral duty to demand that the Red Cross fulfill its most basic responsibility. An operational military update. Yesterday, the IDF notified the families of 3 fallen soldiers abducted by Hamas of their deaths. The 3 fallen soldiers fell in the battles on October 7th and were abducted by Hamas into Gaza. Their deaths were confirmed after examining all the evidence we had and receiving additional reliable evidence. The IDF has notified the families of 395 soldiers that their loved ones fell in battle, as well as 59 members of the police forces. Yesterday, 3 IEDs, improvised explosive devices, were detonated at 2 different locations in the northern Gaza Strip. In one of those instances, our forces were also fired upon, and our forces returned fire towards the source of that gunfire. This was a clear violation of the rules of the hostage release pause. The safety of our forces remains our top priority, and we repeat that any attempt to harm our forces, especially during this hostage release pause, but of course during ongoing hostilities, will be met forcefully. The IDF continues to use this hostage release pause to strengthen our preparations and approve battle plans for the continuation of the war to destroy Hamas in response to the October 7th massacre, and we will continue when Hamas stops releasing hostages, continuing towards those main goals of destroying Hamas so it can never hurt our people following the October 7th massacre and bringing home all of the hostages. This war will end with the end of Hamas. We'll take questions now.
Question. How many hostages do you feel you will be able to get released before hostilities resume?
A question about how many hostages we expect to get released before hostilities resume. I'm not going to speculate on a number. We are, of course, demanding the return, we are demanding the immediate and safe return of all the hostages. We have lined up a very large number of Palestinian violent criminals in Israeli jails as part of that agreement, should Hamas continue to release those hostages. And when Hamas stops releasing hostages, we will resume the military pressure to get everyone else out, because the only thing that has brought Hamas to release hostages, not sudden pangs of conscience about holding little babies hostage, but unrelenting Israeli military pressure to create the conditions for their release. And we hope to get as many out as we can within the framework of the current pause.
So, I have questions.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a journalist from China Global Television Network, and my questions are: how does Israel communicate with the Hamas, and is there any possibility to extend the ceasefire again, or even reach a long-term ceasefire, or even a permanent ceasefire? The second question is, who decides which prisoners should be released, and how is this decided? Thank you.
To your first question, remind me your first question?
How does Israel communicate with Hamas? And is there any possibility to extend the ceasefire again or reach a long-term ceasefire or even permanent ceasefire?
As has already been widely reported, those contacts to secure the release of the hostages were conducted via Qatari mediation with the involvement of the United States as well. The head of the Mossad has already been widely reported running those negotiations. As for whether the current pause may be extended, of course, we want to get all of the hostages home. We're committed to that pledge. There will be no one left behind. We're going to bring back the men and the women, the young and the old, the civilians and the soldiers. The current framework allows for a few more days of hostage release pause, but inasmuch as there is a serious offer on the table to release the remaining hostages as we are demanding, we will of course consider every serious proposal, because we're committed to doing everything to bring them back. As for the question of who decides which prisoners are going to be released, the government decision from last week that provided for the hostage release pause has empowered the War Cabinet to make that determination about which prisoners are going to be released. Okay.
Question from Melanie Lidman from AP. Any update on reports of pause extensions, reports from Hamas earlier today?
Questions about another question about possible extension. As I said, of course, we're doing everything we can in order to get all of those hostages out. Nothing is confirmed till things are confirmed, and as soon as we have information that we can release, we will. But please, we appreciate people's patience and understanding. We're talking about very sensitive negotiations in which human lives hang in the balance, and until there is an official statement, we're not going to add anything on that.
Question from Bryce Stewart. Is there any sense of how many hostages have been handed over to other militant groups?
Indeed, really shocking reports about hostages who are being held by other militant groups inside the Gaza Strip. We hold Hamas fully responsible for the October 7th atrocities, for the abduction of everyone inside the Gaza Strip. We're demanding that Hamas bring them back and do everything in order to bring them back. I'm not going to speculate or comment on specific numbers of who may be held by which faction. That is not relevant for our purposes. Hamas are the de facto governing authorities of the Gaza Strip. They have been for the last 16 years, and they bear full responsibility for the abduction of Israeli hostages into their territory on October 7th.
Question from David Isaac at JNS. Ram, Hadash Tal, and other Arab bodies have criticized the inclusion of Israeli Arabs in the prisoner release deal, arguing that it gives Hamas ownership or a role within the Israeli Arab population. Could you comment on that?
I'm not familiar with the statements that you're referring to, and of course we're not going to get into political arguments between various different political parties. We remain committed to bringing home everyone, irrespective of sex, irrespective of gender, irrespective of religion, of ethnicity, of nationality. We are demanding the immediate, unconditional and safe return of all of the hostages.
That's the last question.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll continue this tomorrow. Thank you.